The lights flared, the applause faded, and the countdown to live TV hit 0. "Welcome to America Speaks," the host smiled, clearly bracing himself. "Tonight, we have Academy Award-winning actor Denzel Washington and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, two voices from different worlds, but both unafraid to speak." Denzel leaned slightly forward, fingers laced, expression calm but sharpened like a blade. AOC sat across, perfectly poised, blazer crisp, eyes alert, smile practiced. The topic was justice, or so the screen behind them claimed in bold letters. But within seconds, it was clear this was personal. "I've heard you speak about equity," Denzel began slowly, "and about systems. But what I don't hear from you is the cost of truth. You speak like you're pitching a platform." "I speak because I buried people." AOC lifted her chin. "And I speak because people are still being buried, Mr. Washington. Don't confuse activism with performance just because I don't speak the way you expect." Denzel's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I don't expect you to sound like me. But I do expect you to stop chasing applause while pretending it's justice. You want votes. I want change." A murmur spread across the studio. AOC's tone stiffened. "You think I want votes? I represent voices, voices that have never had a seat at any table. I fight in the halls of power so they don't have to fight on the streets." Denzel cocked his head. "You sit in power now. And what do? Perform. Perform outrage. Perform justice. But when cameras are off, where's your fire then?" She leaned forward. "You think quoting pain makes you righteous? I deal with policy. You deal with applause." His response was instant. "My applause didn't come from pain. It came despite it." Silence. The host shifted in his chair. The control room hovered on the edge of a commercial break, but the producers knew, this was viral gold. Denzel didn't blink. "Let's make something clear, I don't chase likes, I don't tweet to trend, and I sure as hell don't speak to be adored. I speak because the truth burns. You light it for effect." AOC swallowed, jaw tense. She opened her mouth to reply. And that's when the segment went dark for commercials, but the real show had just begun. As the commercials rolled, silence filled the studio, but not the air between them. Denzel sat unmoved, eyes locked on AOC, whose fingers tapped rhythmically on her thigh like a warning siren. The countdown began again. 3, 2, 1. And just like that, the lights flared back to life. AOC didn't wait this time. "You talk about pain like you cornered the market on it. But let me tell you something, Mr. Washington, growing up in the Bronx, we didn't have Oscars. We had eviction notices and broken schools." Denzel didn't flinch. "You say that like it gives you license to claim every wound in the room." "I say that," she cut in, "because too many people who look like me, and unlike you, don't get hurt unless someone in my seat fights for them." "You don't fight," Denzel shot back, voice steady. "You brand." The audience inhaled audibly. Even the host looked rattled. "You've built a platform where everything's a slogan, Congresswoman. Everything's a hashtag. But where's the grit? Where's the consequence? Where's the quiet part of justice, the part without the spotlight?" AOC narrowed her eyes. "You mistake clarity for theater. Just because I speak plainly doesn't mean it's for show. And frankly, I'd rather wear slogans than silence." He leaned forward. "But you are silent, when it matters most. When the cameras cut. When the bills get rewritten in backrooms. You speak truth when it's fashionable." AOC turned to the audience. "Let me ask everyone here, when a man who's never served in Congress tells a sitting representative that her fight isn't real, isn't that the performance?" Scattered claps. But Denzel raised a finger. "You can clap if you want. But applause doesn't make something true. Courage isn't clicking retweet. It's standing alone when the world tells you to sit." A beat passed. She smirked. You want to be the voice of the people? Try running for office. Try walking into a room where your name means nothing but angry woman of color. Denzel's voice dropped to a gravel. I've walked into rooms where my name meant nothing at all. Before Hollywood. Before speeches. When truth had no cameras. The host looked left, then right. Okay. We're clearly diving deep tonight. When we come back. We're not done, Denzel said, eyes still locked on AOC. Not even close. The red light blinked again. Commercial. But no one dared breathe. The moment cameras cut, a low buzz echoed from the control room. A producer's voice crackled in the earpiece, "Don't stop them, this is gold." But back on set, there was no need for direction. Denzel leaned back now, arms crossed, a calculated pause. AOC shifted, her posture stiffer, her jaw tense. She knew the next round was coming harder. Let's talk about the word you throw around so casually, Denzel began once the red light returned. Representation. Sounds good on a flyer. But it means nothing if you only represent what's easy to say. AOC shot back. And what do you represent, Mr. Washington? Nostalgia? Wisdom in a tailored suit? You keep telling me I'm not real, but I don't remember seeing you in the streets when we marched last summer. Denzel raised an eyebrow. You think presence is proven by Instagram stories? I was marching when cameras weren't invited. When marching meant rubber bullets, not merch drops. A murmur rippled through the audience. But that's your problem, AOC continued, her tone now sharp. You're so desperate to prove you've paid your dues that you won't let anyone else have a voice unless it sounds like yours. He shook his head slowly. No. I'm just tired of watching the struggle turned into theater. Pain edited for engagement. You're branding oppression, Congresswoman, and turning every wound into a campaign clip. Her eyes narrowed. And you're clinging to your pain like a relic, as if no one else can suffer unless they've done it your way. You speak like justice is your exclusive script, he said. But I live the scenes you try to recreate on stage. The host finally cut in, his voice tight. Okay, let's just redirect here. Maybe we can find. No, Denzel said flatly, eyes fixed on AOC. Let's stay right here. She leaned forward, now visibly unsettled. Tell me then, what is your version of truth? That women like me should wait their turn? Speak softer. Smile more. He didn't blink. My version of truth is this: justice doesn't need applause. And you've built a career chasing it. A silence fell like a hammer. The control room was still. The audience froze. Only the blinking red light reminded them, this was still live. And it was far from over. Let me ask you something, AOC said, voice steady but clipped. How do you define truth when you dismiss every form of it that doesn't come in your tone, from your decade, through your pain? Denzel adjusted his cuffs, exhaled through his nose, and spoke slowly, like each word carried weight too dangerous to be rushed. Truth isn't owned by time, he said. But it is tested by it. And the problem is, your generation treats every emotion like it's proof. Every tear, every tremble, every shout, as if performance equals purpose. AOC raised a brow. And your generation acted like silence was dignity. You buried emotion so deep it calcified. That's not strength, that's trauma in a suit. A few in the audience gasped. Denzel didn't flinch. Maybe, he said. But we built endurance while you built echo chambers. The host fidgeted. Let's keep this constructive. Constructive is overrated, Denzel replied coldly. Especially when the house you're building is made of slogans and applause. AOC leaned forward, eyes burning now. You act like speaking loudly is a sin. But maybe the reason you hear echoes is because your own voice hasn't changed in decades. A few claps. Then quiet again. Denzel smirked. Consistency isn't a flaw. And evolution isn't real if all it does is circle back to vanity. AOC was no longer smiling. So that's what you think of us? That we're vain? That fighting for dignity, visibility, inclusion, that's just vanity? I think, Denzel said, lowering his tone, that you conflate being seen with being right. The audience tensed. The host looked off camera, waiting for the next cue. But the control room had already decided, keep it rolling. Denzel continued. You don't want dialogue. You want dominance. And not over truth, over perception. AOC's voice dropped to a whisper, the kind that cuts deeper than any yell. You don't know me. Denzel nodded slowly. No. But I know the script. And in that moment, the crowd wasn't sure who had struck deeper. The red light blinked again. It was time for a break. But no one moved. As the red light flickered back on, the studio didn't reset, it held its breath. Denzel adjusted his seat, but his eyes never left hers. You know, I've played men who've died for less than what you tweet. AOC tilted her head. And I've faced death threats for speaking without a script. The line hit hard. Denzel's expression didn't change, but something in his gaze tightened, just for a moment. She pressed on. You act like struggle comes with a certificate. Like unless you bled in your time, no one else's pain is valid. No, Denzel said calmly, I just don't confuse exposure with courage. And I don't clap when pain becomes a prop. AOC leaned in. Easy to say when your pain earned you millions. But for some of us, survival isn't a story we sell, it's a fight we're still in. That made him pause. But only for a beat. I know poverty, he said. I know racism. I know silence. But I also know this, the loudest ones in the room rarely last. They trend, then fade. And the ones who outlast them, usually speak less, but stand more. The audience was dead quiet now. AOC crossed her arms. You want to paint me as temporary? As a flash in the pan? The Bronx didn't raise me to vanish, it raised me to fight. He nodded. Good. But who are you fighting, the system, or anyone who doesn't applaud you fast enough? The host tried to interject. Let's maybe focus on. AOC cut in. No, let him finish. He's earned the right to question everything, right? Denzel didn't blink. You're sharp, Congresswoman. But sharp doesn't mean right. And rage without direction? That's just noise. You think I'm all rage? She asked. I think you've been taught that rage is your only currency. She stared at him, a fire behind her eyes. And I think you're afraid of a world where your authority isn't automatic anymore. Denzel looked at her for a long second. No. I'm afraid of a world where justice becomes a brand, and truth gets sold in slogans. The host leaned forward, voice low. Coming up after the break. But the audience wasn't going anywhere. Neither were Denzel or AOC. The commercial break came and went, but no one exhaled. When the cameras turned back on, the air was thick, too thick for formalities. AOC was already speaking before the host could finish his welcome back. You don't get to draw the moral lines, Denzel, she said sharply. You've spent your life playing characters who lost everything. But some of us are still living that loss. Denzel's reply was measured, cold. And some of you have made a career out of narrating pain you never carried. That stung, not just AOC, but the audience too. She fired back. That's low. Even for a legend. It's not low, Denzel replied. It's a mirror. And if it hurts to look, maybe it's not the mirror's fault. AOC scoffed. You act like my voice is the problem. But the truth is, what really bothers you, is that the room listens. No, Denzel said, eyes narrowing. What bothers me is when volume replaces value. When followers become the measure of truth. She leaned forward, voice biting. And what bothers me is when old men pretend wisdom means they can't be questioned. The host froze. Denzel's lips pressed into a line. You think I'm afraid of questions? I've faced directors, politicians, racists, and critics. You're not new, just louder. She didn't flinch. And you're not noble, just bitter. That landed. The audience stirred. But Denzel didn't blink. I'm bitter because I've seen hope turned into headlines. And I've seen activists become influencers faster than change can breathe. Maybe you're just angry that no one asks you what to think anymore. He laughed, once. If I wanted applause, I'd act. If I wanted truth, I'd listen. But if I wanted to be worshipped, I'd run for Congress. Her eyes narrowed. You think this is worship? Try running as a young Latina woman in a country that still thinks power wears a tie and gray hair. Denzel met her stare. And try being a black man who had to be perfect just to be allowed in the room. A long silence fell. No one moved. Even the blinking studio lights seemed to hesitate. The tension wasn't theatrical anymore, it was real. Uncomfortable. Unavoidable. The kind of silence that only truth can create. AOC's fingers tapped the desk, not out of nervousness, but control. A silent drumbeat beneath her next words. You talk about pain like it's a credential, she said, her tone sharpened to a blade. But what have you done with yours, other than sell it on screen? Denzel didn't blink. What have you done with yours, other than stream it on TikTok? A gasp. Audible. Raw. She sat up straighter. You think social media is weakness? You think speaking where people actually are makes the message smaller? I think screaming in a room full of mirrors just makes you feel bigger, Denzel said. The host looked down at his notes, then gave up. This was no longer his stage. AOC's voice dropped. You think I'm some trend. But I've watched old men like you try to hold on to relevance by lecturing women like me. And I've watched leaders like you confuse hashtags with heritage, Denzel fired back. She pointed at him now, not to accuse, but to isolate. You keep using the word truth, but what you mean is, your truth. Anything that sounds new, you call fake. Anything that sounds loud, you call desperate. I call unearned noise what it is, he snapped. Earned by who? She asked, her voice rising. By the men who were allowed in the room first. That struck deep. Denzel leaned forward, elbows on the table. You want to talk rooms? I've walked into them with nothing but silence, and walked out with everything but approval. I've walked into rooms where I was the only woman, the only Latina, the youngest voice, and still had to talk twice as loud to be heard half as much. A few people in the audience murmured. Neither of them noticed. Then maybe we should ask, Denzel said slowly, why we're still yelling at each other, instead of the people who built the damn room. Silence. A different kind. Reflective. Even AOC paused. But only for a moment. Because if we stop yelling, she said, they'll forget we're still bleeding. Denzel nodded. Then maybe the goal isn't to outshout, but to outlast. No applause. Just breath. And truth. And tension too thick for cameras to contain. For the first time, neither of them spoke immediately. Denzel's eyes lowered, not in submission, but in calculation. AOC stared ahead, her jaw tight, not out of anger, but exhaustion. They'd both landed punches. Now came the part where meaning either deepened, or disappeared. The host, sensing an opening, tried to step in. We're talking about truth tonight, right? So let me ask. Denzel cut him off without turning. Truth doesn't need a panel. It just needs silence, long enough to be heard. AOC raised an eyebrow. Then why spend 10 minutes proving who shouts it better? He turned toward her slowly. Because sometimes silence isn't an option. She nodded. Especially when people are dying in the dark. That line changed something. The audience quieted further, if that was possible. Denzel looked at her, not as an opponent, but as a survivor. What keeps you up at night? The question was simple. Devastatingly human. AOC blinked. Then answered. The thought that I might spend my whole life fighting, and still lose to comfort. He sat back. I get that. A beat. AOC folded her hands. What about you? Denzel paused longer than anyone expected. That one day, I'll forget what it felt like to not be invited. There it was. The wall cracked. Just slightly. They didn't agree. They didn't even like each other. But they saw it, the thread. Between fame and fire. Between pain and the stage. I'm not here to impress you, AOC said softly. Good, Denzel replied. Because I'm not here to applaud you. And yet, for a moment, there was something like respect. No one clapped. No music played. But the air in the room had shifted, less like a battleground, more like a reckoning. AOC finally turned to the host. You still want that closing statement? He looked stunned. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. But before she could speak, Denzel raised a hand. Ladies first, he said. Not sarcasm. Not surrender. Just space. And maybe that was the loudest message of the night. A studio producer gave the signal. The host cleared his throat, voice steadier than before. We've got time for one final question, from the audience. A murmur of anticipation rippled across the room. A spotlight swung and landed on a young woman in her 20s. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from urgency. I just want to ask, she began, eyes shifting between Denzel and AOC. What do you say to people like me? People who were raised on faith, told to believe in truth, but now, we're drowning in noise, division, labels. I don't know who to trust anymore. Silence. Then Denzel leaned forward. I say this, he began slowly. If you're not sure who to trust, start with who doesn't beg for it. His voice echoed. I've seen people weaponize truth to sell books, win elections, build brands. But real truth? It's quieter. And sometimes it'll cost you more than it gives. AOC looked at the girl, then turned to the camera. I say this, she offered. Don't wait for someone on TV to tell you what truth is. Look around. Who's organizing your block? Who's showing up when the cameras aren't? That's who you trust. The girl nodded, teary-eyed. Denzel exhaled. You want a hero? Don't look here. He gestured to the stage. Look home. Look within. AOC crossed her arms. And when that doesn't feel like enough? Then remember, Denzel replied, sometimes it's not about feeling enough, it's about not quitting anyway. The crowd didn't cheer. They absorbed. They breathed it in. The host tried to wrap it all with a neat bow. Well, this has certainly been. Denzel stood. Don't. The host paused. Denzel looked across the studio, into the lens, and into every living room watching. Let people sit with it. No wrap-up. No applause sign. Just, let it sting a little. Then he walked off set. No mic drop. No wave. Just presence. AOC watched him go. She didn't follow. But her eyes lingered. And maybe that was the real closing statement. The red on-air sign blinked off. But no one moved. Producers exhaled. Staff whispered. Cameras powered down, but the energy in the room crackled like a wire left exposed. The silence after the storm wasn't peace, it was pressure. Backstage, Denzel walked down the dim hallway, his jacket slung over one shoulder, eyes unfocused. He wasn't angry. He wasn't triumphant. He was hollowed out. Like something real had finally been said, and now there was nothing left to perform. Behind him, AOC exited the set slower. A makeup artist offered her a towel, she waved it off. They ended up in the same hallway. Neither looked surprised. "You meant what you said?" she asked, tone stripped of stage fire. He nodded. "Every word." "You think I don't?" He met her eyes. "I think you've got fire. But fire doesn't always build. Sometimes it just burns. And silence doesn't always mean wisdom," she replied. "Sometimes it's just fear dressed up as grace." They stood there. Equal footing. No crowd. No applause. Just the echo of everything unsaid. "You gonna tweet a clip?" he asked. "You gonna give a speech about how you humbled me?" "No," Denzel said. "Because I didn't." A pause. "I didn't either," AOC said. A producer peeked out. "They're asking for a joint statement. Press is waiting." Neither moved. Then Denzel chuckled, low and sharp. "Tell them the truth didn't need a statement. It already happened." AOC gave the faintest smile. "And it wasn't pretty." "No," he agreed. "But it was honest." They nodded, a mutual understanding neither sought, but couldn't deny. As Denzel exited into the night air, phones were already lighting up. Clips going viral. Comment sections on fire. Hashtags forming alliances and battle lines. But none of that mattered in that moment. Because behind all the noise, all the spin, all the content, two people had finally spoken without pretending. And the silence that followed? It was the loudest thing all night. Denzel Washington didn't walk into that studio to win. He walked in to speak. To call out performance dressed as principle. And when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez fought back, the fire got real. This wasn't a debate, it was a reckoning. And for once, America wasn't watching actors. It was watching truth clash with ambition. The mics are off. The studio is quiet. But what they said, and how they said it, will echo long after the cameras stopped rolling.